The 37-year-old Erica Lloyd lived in Walnut Ridge, California. 2020 was a difficult year for her. She had lost her job due to the pandemic. Erica was struggling with the stress of losing her job and trying to homeschool her son. In February, Erica decided to get away for a bit by taking a trip to Joshua Tree National Park. She left her home on June 14th. Erica stayed in contact with her family, but then abruptly all contact stopped on June 16th. Erica would never be seen or heard from again. That same day, a California Highway Patrol officer found Erica's black Honda sedan abandoned on Highway 62, about 20 miles from Joshua Tree National Park. Investigators noted that the front and back windshields of the car were broken. The radio was also shattered, and the airbag had been deployed. Erica's items were still inside the vehicle, but Erica herself was nowhere to be found. It seemed to investigators that the damage to the car was consistent with an accident, and it did not seem like anyone had broken into the car. They were unable to find any evidence that the collision happened anywhere in the area, however. Investigators did not believe Erica had camped in any of the nearby campgrounds, as her items were still inside her car. No evidence that any campers had been in the area could be found. Erica's family members worried that she may have become disoriented after the possible car accident. Investigators tried to find any signs of Erica in the surrounding areas, and they enlisted the help of a man named Doug Billings. Billings is an expert when it comes to the area's caves and mines. In February 2014, he assisted when Erin Corwin disappeared from Joshua Tree National Park. Her body would later be found in an abandoned mine. In February 202X, year missing, hikers in Wonder Valley found human remains near Danby Road and Amboy Road, just a few miles from where Erica's car had been found. Investigators were able to confirm that the remains had been identified as those of Erica Lloyd. What exactly happened to her is still unknown, but the investigation is still ongoing. Erica's brother, Colin Lloyd, shared this on the Bring Erica Home Facebook page after hearing that the remains were identified as those of Erica. It is with a heavy heart that I announce that these remains have been identified by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department as my sister, Erica. There is no easy way for me to tell you all this, and there's no easy way for any of us to receive it. My wish is that we can all lean in a little closer, hold each other up, and remind each other more often that we are here for one another with open arms and endless love. It is what she would have wanted. It is the spirit of who she was. It is frustrating that these two cases are not fully solved, but there is reason to be grateful that the Lloyd family and the Corwin family can now at least have some sense of closure. 50-year-old Marie Heiser lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in 1977. She had a husband named William and 2 children. Marie was a homemaker and a part-time employee at the former Ashbourne Country Club in Cheltenham, Pennsylvania. Her husband William was a member of the Philadelphia Police Department's Highway Patrol from the 1950s until the 1960s, when he suffered a serious injury. One day in 1977, Marie's son William Jr. came home from boarding school to find out his mom was gone. William Sr. then told his 2 children that their mom had walked out on them. William Jr. found it strange that Marie's belongings were still in their home, but did not ask many questions, as he was very young. In June of 1977, a teenager who was biking home in a wooded area in Townsend, Delaware, discovered human remains. Townsend is about 65 miles south of where Marie lived in Philadelphia. The remains could not be identified. The case went cold as fingerprints and dental records failed to turn up any matches. In February 2008, investigators extracted a DNA profile from the remains. It was entered into a national DNA database, but no matches could be made. In February 2017, investigators sent the sample to a Virginia company called Parabon Nanolabs. A forensic artist working for them used the DNA sample to create a sketch of the victim. Using genetic genealogy, Parabon Nanolabs was also able to create a family tree of the victim. In February 2019, a police officer in Montgomery County, Maryland, Stephen Smogoreski, took over the research and worked tirelessly to develop new leads on the identity of the remains. In February, investigators were finally able to confirm that the remains belonged to Marie Heiser. Investigators called William Jr. to tell him that they had found his mom's remains. This is what he had to say. "It was a shock to us. You are never expecting a phone call like that. You think to yourself, well, as horrible as the story is, there is some closure. Before, we wondered where our mom was. Now, we are wondering what happened to her." So one door closes, another opens. William Jr. does not believe that his father had anything to do with his mother's disappearance. "He would be the last person I would ever think could hurt anybody. He was a saint. Took care of his family, never raised his voice or hands, or argued or anything." William Sr. worked as a truck driver after he could no longer be a police officer. He moved to Daytona Beach, Florida, in the late 1970s. He passed away in February 2006. Michael Eckert of the New Castle County Police Department in Delaware said William Sr.'s explanation that Marie had left the family was one of the many questions they were investigating. 3.5-month-old April Nicole Williams was last seen in Washington, D.C. on December 3, 1983. She and her mother, Eleanor Williams, were traveling by bus from Suffolk, Virginia, to see Eleanor's boyfriend in Kansas when they got stuck in Washington, D.C., at the old Trailway station with a 3-hour layover. According to Eleanor, a very friendly woman who called herself Latoya approached them while they were waiting in the terminal and struck up a conversation. She was cooing over the infant and asking Eleanor lots of questions, such as, "Where are you going? How old is your baby?" And then she politely asked Eleanor, "Do you mind if I hold her?" And Eleanor agreed. She began fawning over the baby, telling Eleanor how pretty she was. While the two talked, Eleanor told Latoya that she had originally considered naming April Latoya Renee, which the stranger found to be an amazing coincidence. Latoya told Eleanor that she was headed west, but oddly, she didn't have any luggage with her. It turns out that most of these details about Latoya were most likely untrue. Originally, Eleanor said that while the stranger was holding the baby, she left to go get a soda and walked in the nearby direction of a Hardee's restaurant, then suddenly took off running. Years later, she would say that after holding the infant for a few minutes, the stranger told her the baby needed to be changed and Eleanor agreed to let the stranger take her to do just that. However, after 10 minutes had passed and they hadn't returned, Eleanor became very concerned and went looking for them, only to realize they were gone. No matter which story is true, April definitely went missing, but it is unknown why Eleanor told two different stories. However, Eleanor was given a polygraph test and passed and is not considered a suspect. April's abductor is described as a slender black female in her 20s, 5'3", with red braided hair. Investigators believe the stranger who kidnapped April probably wanted to raise her as her own child. This would lead to one of Washington, D.C.'s largest missing child searches ever in the history of the city, but sadly, they were unable to find April. Eleanor will never forget the day her daughter was abducted, and with her being only 18 at the time, it is a nightmare she has relived all these years. She had grown up on a 9-acre farm in southeast Virginia and had never ventured out more than 30 miles before leaving home on that day. Eleanor continues to search for her daughter, but as of today, the case remains unsolved. Relisha Rudd was born on October 29, 2005. On March 1, 2014, at the age of 8, she went missing in Washington, D.C. Relisha had been living with her mother and 3 brothers in the D.C. General Shelter, which used to be a hospital, when she was befriended by 51-year-old janitor Khalil Malik Tatum, a former felon who had spent many years in prison. Relisha and Tatum were very close, and her family even described him as her godfather. Relisha was often provided clean clothes by the school staff, and she often talked about the horrible living conditions she endured. She stopped attending school, but it was a month before her absence was reported to police. Officials explained the absences had been excused because Relisha was sick and in the care of Dr. Tatum. After police launched a missing person investigation, they learned Tatum wasn't a doctor at all but was actually the 51-year-old janitor from the D.C. General Family Shelter. Relisha's mother, Shamika, claims that it was her mother, Melissa, who wrote the letters to the school stating she was under the care of Dr. Tatum. Her family all point the finger at one another for the disappearance of Relisha. Tatum spent a lot of time with children at the homeless shelter, especially Relisha, and was often seen with her, taking her to various places such as the movies and buying her gifts. An investigation revealed that the last sighting of her had been weeks prior when she was caught on camera with Tatum at a hotel. In March 2014, the FBI released surveillance footage showing Relisha and Tatum going into a hotel room at a Holiday Inn Express in D.C. on February 26, 2014. The next day, Tatum suspiciously purchased 22-gallon trash bags. Almost a month later, on March 20, 2014, Tatum's wife, Andrea Tatum, was found deceased from a gunshot wound to the head in a hotel in Prince George's County, Maryland. The couple is seen on video entering the hotel room together the night before. The FBI would then issue an arrest warrant for Tatum for the murder of his wife. In March, searchers found Tatum's body in a shed in the Kenilworth Park and Aquatic Gardens, shot in an apparent suicide. The handgun used in the suicide is the same handgun that was used in his wife's murder. Relisha's stepfather, Antonio Wheeler, her mother, Shamika, and her grandmother, Melissa, went on the Steve Wilkos talk show. At that point, Antonio and Shamika were no longer together. Shamika told Wilkos that she and her relatives believed Relisha was going to a pool party with Tatum's granddaughter, despite the fact the hotel had no indoor pool. Police would say that the family often let Relisha spend time with the janitor, but Shamika has denied handing her daughter over to Tatum. Instead, Shamika said she was under the impression that her daughter was at her sister's house under the care of her grandmother, Melissa Young. That's why, she claimed, it took so long for the young girl to be reported as missing. Shamika also told Wilkos she had no phone and no means to communicate with her mother and Relisha. When asked by Wilkos what he believed occurred with Relisha's mother, Antonio responded, "I believe she has something to do with it, and also her mother too." Relisha's mother defended Tatum, claiming he was a good man, and said the police told her Tatum was never a suspect. The stepfather, Antonio, and grandmother, Melissa, both took lie detector tests on the show and passed, but Shamika refused to take the test. Antonio has also had fingers pointed at him because he posted pictures with wads of cash in his mouth alongside images of new sneakers and a new cell phone around the time Relisha went missing. The images prompted rumors that the couple sold Relisha to a sex trafficking organization, rumors that Antonio denies and that remain unconfirmed. Investigators believe Relisha is possibly a victim of sex trafficking. A 14-year-old girl from the same homeless shelter had been sex trafficked to Los Angeles. In 2017, the DC police named July 11th as National Relisha Rudd Remembrance Day. Natalie Wilson, co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation, would say, "We believe that someone has information as to the whereabouts of Relisha. All we need is one person to come forward." Human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States, with hubs in Georgia, Illinois, Texas, and Maryland. According to the National Center for Victims of Crime, most of those kidnapped for the sex trade are U.S. citizens, despite public perception that it typically involves immigrants. As of today, Relisha still remains missing, and the case is unsolved. 58-year-old George Longshore was a healthcare executive who lived in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, when he was murdered in Washington, D.C., on November 13, 2004. He had attended the wedding of his daughter's best friend and then a wedding reception with his wife, Joanne, their daughter Janelle, and her husband, Joe Kolinsky. They were celebrating with a night of dancing at the wedding reception. The four were returning to their vehicle outside St. Francis Hall at 14th and Quincy Streets at around 10:49 p.m. when 2 or 3 men came out from the bushes and attacked the family. They pistol-whipped Janelle, Joe, and Joanne and then shot George in the chest. George's other daughter, Alicia Longshore Flannery, said that they believed her father was reaching for his wallet when he was shot by one of the men, who may have thought he was trying to reach for a gun. One of the first things he said was, "I was shot. Take care of your mother. Make sure she's okay," Alicia said. He kept saying he didn't understand why they shot him because he had given them his wallet. The men took about $100 cash from George's wallet and then tossed it onto the ground. Gail Murdoch, a nearby resident, was getting ready for bed when she heard gunshots and then heart-wrenching screams. George's wife ran to the hall for help while Janelle crouched beside her bleeding father. George died a few hours later at a nearby hospital. The streets had been calm that night, and the only eyewitnesses were the family members, who had a hard time identifying the suspects using mugshots. Sadly, 2 of George's brothers and his daughter Alicia have since passed away. His family members describe how George took care of his siblings as a teenager after their parents had both passed away. George was one of 198 people murdered in Washington, D.C. in 2004 alone. And as of today, this case remains unsolved. Aileen Logan was only 36 years old when she went missing on September 15, 1999, from Washington, D.C. She was last seen at around 1:30 a.m. in the morning. Family members had been trying to reach her for hours but were unable to and became very worried. They then reached out to the apartment manager to conduct a wellness check at her home on South Capitol Street. They found the apartment in complete disarray and also signs of a struggle. They also found her baby son, Jerome, still in his infant seat. Thankfully, he was fine but had been there alone for a few hours. This is where the case went cold, with Aileen missing and no answers as to where she might be. Eileen's nephew, Henderson Long, became so passionate about finding out what had happened to his aunt that he created the DC's Missing Voice platform to help find other missing people in the DC area. He never stopped searching for answers, but 18 years passed before a break in the case. Family members of Aileen provided their DNA to detectives, hoping to maybe get some answers. Everyone was shocked when a match was discovered. The match turned out to be a Jane Doe that was discovered 1 year after Aileen went missing, only about 1.5 miles from where she was last seen. Unfortunately, the body they found was all bones, and the cause of death could not be determined. However, detectives confirmed they are now investigating her death as a homicide. So what could have led to her death? Turns out, hours before she went missing, she witnessed the murder of a man across the hallway from where she lived. When detectives showed up on the scene, she reportedly discussed with them what she saw. It is believed the suspect or suspects came back later and either followed Aileen inside her apartment or were able to get her to open her apartment door. Either way, there were definitely signs of a struggle inside the apartment. There are still no answers as to who did this to Aileen, but the DC Metropolitan Police are still looking for information that may lead to an arrest and conviction. As of today, this case remains unsolved. On December 11, 1985, firefighters were called to a reported fire at a townhouse in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. They found the only thing on fire was 38-year-old Lynn Amos, who had third-degree burns over 80% of her body and was lying unconscious in her bed. She was taken to a nearby hospital, where she sadly passed away 10 days later on December 21st. Investigators originally thought she had died after accidentally setting herself on fire from smoking in bed. However, according to her family, she was not a smoker, and investigators found no traces in her home that she ever had been. After a toxicology report was performed, they found her blood alcohol level was at 0.25%, which is almost impossible. Lynn would have had to consume 9 to 14 drinks in the span of 1 hour to reach that blood alcohol level. When insurance investigators examined the room where Lynn was found, they discovered the mattress, pillow, and floor had been doused in some kind of accelerant. Further testing revealed the accelerant used was a mixture of kerosene, gasoline, and turpentine. Now that investigators knew the fire was set intentionally, her death was officially ruled a homicide. When investigators began looking into who might have killed Lynn, they discovered she worked as a financial consultant for a management consulting firm, where she was involved in investigating Mexican banks. During her investigations, she had discovered seriously flawed lending practices that would reflect poorly on the Mexican banks. While she never discussed specifics with anyone about her investigations, she had mentioned to some friends over brunch that she had seen some dangerous things during her work in Mexico. Lynn was last heard from at 10 p.m. that night when she called her office, claiming that she would be late for work the next day. Her friends and family believed that sometime after midnight, her killer broke into her home and killed her. Because there were no signs of forced entry, the killer may have had a key. They speculate that the killer forced her to drink enough alcohol to render her unconscious. The killer then spread the flammable substances on her bed and body and set her on fire. Lynn's friends speculated that she may have found something related to drug money or fraudulent loans. Her family's attorney believes that her death was a professional hit. Interestingly, her reports on the banks were never finished, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. 30-year-old Diane Lacosias lived in Camden County, Missouri, in 1984. She worked as a dental assistant in the area. On December 15, 1984, Diane was driving home from a party when her vehicle was run off a dark lake road in Camelot Estates in Camdenton, Missouri. An unknown man then severely beat Diane. Diane was found next to her car. She was still alive. Sadly, she would pass away 2 days later because of her injuries. It would be difficult for investigators to find the person who committed the crime, as there were no witnesses and DNA testing was not advanced enough to analyze the DNA left behind at the crime scene. It would only be in 1989, 5 years after the crime was committed, that investigators had a person of interest. They believed Larry Gene Hicks took Diane's life. He lived in Camelot Estates at the time of the crime but relocated to Franklin, Louisiana. His family members said that Larry came home that night late, between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., which would have been right after the attack. He had a scratch on his cheek. He also had blood on his pants. When he entered the home, he went to wash his hands and his face, something he didn't do on previous evenings. The next few days, Larry was drinking more and became more violent. Investigators interviewed him, but he denied any involvement. He said the scratch happened during a car accident. Despite investigators believing he was very much involved, they did not have enough evidence to arrest him. On May 12, 2021, Camden County detectives traveled to Larry's home in Franklin, Louisiana, to question him. He admitted that he saw Diane the day she passed away. He claimed he was drinking for around 10 hours that day and was very intoxicated. He remembers seeing Diane at one of the bars he had been drinking in. Larry remembered very well what happened that evening, a little too well. When asked if he took the life of Diane, he said that he could not remember but hoped that he did not. A DNA sample was then taken from him. 78-year-old Larry Gene Hicks was then arrested. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. Camden County Sheriff Tony Helms said that he has been with the department since 1991, and he has seen how many thousands of hours have gone into solving the case. He was also able to tell Diane's family in person that an arrest had been made. Prosecutor J. Caleb Cunningham said, "This case has never left this community and has always been in the back of the minds of every person who has ever worked in law enforcement, including me and my office. We were not going to rest because no matter what you do here, if you commit a crime, we will find you and we will charge you, and spare no expense in doing that." 9-year-old Angie Houseman lived in St. Anne, a quiet suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. On November 18, 1993, Angie was on her way home from school. She was last seen leaving the school bus at her normal bus stop, just 8 houses from her home. Angie never made it home. Her parents called the police to report her missing. 9 days later, Angie's body was found tied to a tree by a deer hunter in a bush wildlife conservation area in St. Charles, Missouri. Investigators concluded that she was alive when she was tied to the tree and passed away due to exposure. She had also been assaulted. Investigators were able to collect DNA from duct tape found at the crime scene and from Angie's body, which had belonged to an unknown man. Investigators believed that the crime could be linked to similar crimes that had happened in the area, but were unable to prove it. Thousands of detectives were assigned to the case. A tip line dedicated to the investigation received more than 5,000 calls in just one day from people offering information. Unfortunately, the case would go cold for many years. That was until 2019 when the case was reopened. In March of 2019, a crime lab created a DNA profile for the suspect. The DNA profile was placed in Cody's and was matched to 61-year-old Earl Webster Cox. At the time of the crime, he had family and lived just a few blocks from Angie's school. Earl had joined the Air Force in 1975 but was dishonorably discharged after it was discovered that he had assaulted 4 children in Germany. He served 8 years in prison before being paroled for some stupid reason. In August of 2020, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Members of Angie's family appeared for the plea and sentencing. The sentencing came too late, however, for Angie's mom, who passed away in 2016 at the age of 52. Angie's brother Ron had to say, "I was 2 when she was taken. She was a big part of my life, so to have her taken away like that was taking away my best friend." In March of 2021, Earl admitted to even more crimes, for which he was sentenced to 10 years. He will serve this sentence simultaneously with his life sentence. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, surrounded by natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They lived in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them got along very well, and they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Lamb. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. They had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. He underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements like sitting up and holding his head before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was better off just hanging around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile toward his wife. In addition, he lost his memory. He could not remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss and difficulty concentrating. This made him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from his injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controlled the family spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. After some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with him to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house was located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job helped him earn more income, gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties, and improve his health. Doctors observed a steady improvement in his condition, moving in a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood had improved significantly, Christine still hesitated to return to him. She was afraid that old problems might return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visited them regularly. Martin's children also visited him from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoyed activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they had loved in their youth. These casino visits became a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often inviting friends and acquaintances over to play poker, hosting backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seemed they had found each other again and were happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tried to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by herself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest. spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and lost a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident. But he didn't talk about how he had made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin and brought the children to visit him. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely did not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin was the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She had still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending, and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, helping him earn extra income while he was recovering from the traffic accident and struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, believing that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he had devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to him was Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of the incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery because valuables or personal items in the house were not missing. Even the money left in a visible spot was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and that Glenna was involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that the illegal trade may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believed there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol had belonged to Martin for many years, yet both of them were shot with it. At first, the attacker must have entered the house, known exactly where the weapon was, and retrieved it. Then he would have found the magazine, loaded the gun, and started shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers were found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There was a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently, an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room and then the body was moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she had searched online for how to use the Uyghur 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna as the perpetrator of the crime based on all the collected evidence. The investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This could be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger. The shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and was ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment, she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "Beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much to hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts said the parrot had formed a close relationship with its owner, Martin, and had learned to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agreed that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49-year-old Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. Tiffany Daniels was born on March 11, 1988 in Dallas, Texas. She had a big interest in art and had an outgoing personality. Tiffany enjoyed painting and eventually took a job at a Pensacola State College theater in Florida where she painted sets. In 2013, 25-year-old Tiffany had some financial problems. She had to get a new roommate. Carrie Nichols responded to the advertisement she made on Craigslist. He was the father of one of her friends. Carey was separating from his wife and wanted to live closer to his job. Tiffany's parents were uneasy about her sharing the apartment with a man more than twice her age, but she accepted him as her new roommate. On August 11th, Tiffany started the day by having a goodbye breakfast with her boyfriend. He had been accepted into the graduate robotics program at the University of Texas in Austin. That evening, Tiffany and Gary were watching movies. Both of them went to bed early as they had work in the morning. At 5 a.m. in the morning, Gary heard the front door open and close a few times, but he did not want to check if it was Tiffany or not. At 7 a.m. when he left for work, he saw that her car was gone and assumed that she had also gone to work. Tiffany did make it to her work that day. She asked her supervisor if she could leave early and if she could take some time off, possibly the whole week. She did not give a reason why. Just before 5 p.m. she left work. Tiffany has not been seen or heard from since. The next day, Gary told his daughter to message Tiffany's family as she did not come home. By the end of the week, her family realized it was time to call the police and reported her missing. Investigators found nothing strange at her home. They also found that her boyfriend was in Austin the whole day and had not secretly come back to Pensacola. Tiffany was really sad after her boyfriend left for Austin, so investigators had to look at the possibility as she ran away or decided to take her own life. 8 days after Tiffany was last seen, a jogger found her vehicle in a parking lot at Park West in Pensacola Beach. Inside of the car was her bicycle, cell phone, wallet, and some of her paintings. Investigators found a fingerprint on the steering wheel and a door handle at a knot belonged to Tiffany. Security camera footage showed how the vehicle was being driven on the evening of the day she disappeared, but it was not possible to see who was driving. 2 residents of the area told investigators that they saw a man climbing out of the car. A large part of the beach and the neighboring Santa Rosa Island was searched, but no one found Tiffany. In January of 2014, a woman who worked as a waitress at a restaurant in Midway, Louisiana said that shortly after the disappearance, she had seen a woman matching Tiffany's description come in with 2 other women. The woman who might have been Tiffany had long sleeves and had her cuffs over her hands despite it being hot outside. She also made sure out of this fish she was eating and not chicken. The waitress remembers telling the woman that she looked like the missing Tiffany Daniels. The woman then left the restaurant in a hurry. Tiffany's family believes this was her. She would always put her sleeves over her hands if she was feeling cold. Tiffany was also a pescatarian and always made sure she was not eating chicken. This now made her family believe that she might have been abducted. Investigators are still working the case, but it is not known what happened to Tiffany Daniels. Ben McDaniel was born on April 15, 1980, in Memphis, Tennessee. In 2010, Ben found himself down on his luck. His brother passed away in 2008 in his arms. He had also recently got divorced. Ben's construction business also failed and left him owing $50,000 to the Internal Revenue Service. His parents suggested that he take a sabbatical. They offered to support him financially, and they said that he can stay at a family's beach home at Santa Rosa Beach on the Emerald Coast in Florida. He accepted their offer and went to stay there with his Labrador. This allowed Ben to indulge in his favorite hobby, which was scuba diving. He could frequently be seen at a vortex spring. It is a popular place to do cave diving. On August 18, 2010, Ben was at a vortex spring. In the middle of the day, he did one dive. Other divers saw him looking closely at an area around the cave entrance. It looked as if he was planning something. When he was done diving, he went to fill his tanks at a dive shop. The rest of the afternoon he spent by himself testing his equipment and making notes. Just after 7 p.m., he called his mother. It would be the last contact he had with his family. After the call, he went in the water again. Witnesses saw him as he started to descend. He had a helmet with lights on, indicating he was going into the caves. 2 days later, Ben's truck was stolen in the parking lot of Vortex Spring. People had gotten to know Ben, noticed, and the police were called to report him missing. His wallet and cell phone were found in a cab of his truck. At the beach house, officers found his dog, who was hungry from going unfit for 2 days. It seemed to investigators that Ben never resurfaced and he most likely drowned. Other divers then came forward to help in a recovery operation. They scoured the cave looking in every small crevice that Ben might have crawled in. Many of the divers risked their own lives to help find Ben. They found his equipment at the entrance of the cave, but was not able to find Ben. On August 22nd, Ed Sorensen, a veteran cave diver and recovery specialist, decided to help, and he went to Vortex Spring the next day. He went close to 2,000 feet into the cave. Ed was not able to find Ben. Plenty of other divers helped as well, and a remotely operated underwater vehicle was also used. Some people started questioning if Ben was there at all. Cadaver dogs searched the woods around Vortex Spring without success. In 2011, Bain's family started to believe had Bain passed away as a result of foul play. They hired a private investigator who found that a lot of people associated with Vortex Spring had a criminal history. A lot of people also believe had Bain simply ran away. His parents do not believe that is what happened. Feel free to let me know in the comments section what do you think happened to Ben McDaniel. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright and cheerful child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there, where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off, as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt a deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices in a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, She heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions. And Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. "I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy and that he might have had a scar or something on his face." For days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time. As witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, one advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, it later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released and less than a year later was arrested for driving under the influence just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God!" The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger, but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10th, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10th, in 2010, a few months before the trial, hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis' grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years, she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had hurt her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis' actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious. In February 1982, an older man and young woman walked into a drug stop in Ash Fork, Arizona. The two of them just wanted some aspirin, as the young woman had some toothache. On February 14th, about 2 weeks later, investigators entered the drug stop. They showed pictures of clothing that had been found on a body of a teenage girl. One of the workers, Patty Wilkins, realized that a young woman who entered the truck stop about 2 weeks earlier with the older man had been wearing the same clothes. The young woman had been found under a cedar tree off Interstate 40. An autopsy revealed that she most likely passed away due to strangulation or asphyxiation. Patty Wilkins felt extremely guilty after realizing she knew the girl. It was determined that a young woman's life was taken just a few hours after leaving the truck stop. Wilkins remembered that she asked the young woman at one point if she was okay leaving with the older man, and she said yes. A composite was made of both the girl and the older man, who was now a prominent suspect. I really don't know what to say about a composite sketch of the man. No one came forward with any more information, and the two of them went unidentified. The young woman was called Valentine Sally, as she was found on Valentine's Day. After investigators exhausted all possible leads and could still not identify them, the case went cold. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children decided to try and help identify Valentine Sally. They obtained a DNA sample belonging to her. Recently, with advances in DNA technology, they made use of genetic genealogy to identify her. They used multiple public DNA databases to try and find relatives of Valentine Sally. In 2021, investigators were finally able to confirm her to be Carolyn Celeste Eaton. 17-year-old Carolyn lived in St. Louis, Missouri. On Christmas Day 1981, she ran away after a fight with one of her 6 siblings. Investigators are still trying to find out who took her life, but hope that Carolyn's family can have a sense of closure knowing what happened to their loved one. On July 5, 1966, a young man and woman checked into a motel in Pecos, Texas. The two checked in using the name Mr. and Mrs. Russell Bethune. A few hours after checking in, the woman went swimming in a pool while the man slept in their room. Just after that, screams could be heard coming from the swimming pool area. A maid found a woman's body in a swimming pool of the motel. As the woman was being taken away in an ambulance, her companion checked out of the motel and was never seen again. An autopsy was done and it was found that she passed away due to drowning, so no foul play was suspected, and it is believed the man lived out of fear. No Mr. and Mrs. Bethune matching their description was found. It is not known why they used false names. Investigators tried to identify the man and the woman to no avail. She was called the Pecos Jane Doe. She was estimated to be between 17 and 20 years old. No one had matched her description whilst reported missing in the area. The citizens of Pecos helped raise money so the woman could be buried and have a service. She was laid to rest in a Fairview cemetery. Her gravestone simply read, "Unknown girl drowned, July 5, 1966. Every year investigators would take flowers to her resting place, but they were unable to solve the case, and it went cold. In 2019, the case was reopened, and her body was exhumed so her DNA could be collected. Recently, the Pecos Police Department worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and genealogy technology companies. A composite sketch was then made, hoping that someone would come forward and knew her, but no one did. With the help of DNA, however, it was then discovered that the biggest gender is 17-year-old Jolene Hemme. Police Chief Lisa Tarango had us to say about how DNA helped. It absolutely played a huge role, at least in identity of who she is. I think if more people in this type of situation with lost family members or unidentified persons get involved in cases like this and cooperate and submit DNA, I think there would be a huge resolution of missing and unidentified people. Investigators still see it as an open and active investigation, and they want anyone with more information to come forward. 17-year-old Jolene was one of 15 children and lived in Salina, Kansas. For her family, It is a bittersweet moment, as they always had some hope as she was still alive, even if it had been over 50 years had I last saw her. On August 15, 1978, a logging crew came across human remains in Jackson County, Wisconsin. It could be determined that the remains belonged to a male, but not much else was known. Investigators had no idea who the man was, how he got there, or how lost his life. A composite sketch was made, hoping that someone could identify him. But no one did, and the case soon went cold. A DNA sample from the man was entered into a national database for missing and unidentified persons, but no matches could be made. It was only recently that a DNA DOH project got involved and the case could move forward. In April of 2021, Jackson County Sheriff Dwayne Valdera announced that the remains were that of Dennis Reagan McCann. He was a 29-year-old man who went missing from Kenosha, Wisconsin. He was born in DeKalb, Illinois, where he attended DeKalb High School. Dwayne Walthera hopes that identification would lead them to finding out what exactly happened to Dennis Reagan McCann. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the athletic training club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him, and he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor, with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the first floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, he had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness. And the detectives police it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, no witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that on May 20th, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station, but without evidence. He denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find the connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell, was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne as part of the deal. He received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind: we don't want her to be forgotten. On September 9, 1985, a bear hunter found human bones near Crystal Creek, Montana. It was determined that the bones belonged to a woman. It was believed as she was most likely Asian and of Japanese ethnicity, yet she may have had Caucasian heritage. She had dental work unique to Asia, which was extensive and of good quality. The woman also had thin, wavy and treated black to light brown hair. Teeth on the right side of her mouth indicated as she was a smoker. She had prominent cheekbones and was most likely right-handed. Investigators tried hard to identify the woman, but was unable to, and she was given the name Christy Crystal Creek. The Missoula Sheriff's Office Gold Case Unit partnered with Offrim, a private lab that conducts advanced DNA analysis. Investigators used DNA profiles from commercial sites like JetMatch and Family Tree DNA to crowdsource genetic and ancestry data. After weeks of genealogy research, investigators identified relatives of the victim. Finally, in May of 2021, they identified the victim as Janet Lee Lucas. Janet was born in October 1960. She grew up in California before moving to Spokane, Washington with her parents and her 7 siblings. Janet disappeared at the age of 23, leaving behind her 5-year-old son. She was last seen in Sandpoint, Idaho. No records show how Janet lived or spent any time in Montana before her body was found there. Missoula Detective Captain Dave Conway said, "We cannot rest on our success of having identified Janet. We must now seek justice for Janet." The sheriff's office released a photo of Janet, taken shortly before she passed away, in hopes someone may recognize her and come forward with more information. Janet's family had this to say in a statement: "After decades of missing Janet, our family is heartbroken to learn as she was tragically taken, unidentified, and spent a large amount of years alone. However, she never spent one moment without being loved. Janet had a contagious smile, warm personality, and wore her heart on her sleeve. Janet had been missed dearly, searched for, but most importantly, never forgotten. Janet was loved by everyone. Not only was she a mother, she was a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a friend, and now a grandmother. The 4 beautiful children. We are grateful to finally be able to bring her home to us, as well as bring Janet the peace and rest she so deserves." Investigators believe that Wayne Nance might be responsible for taking her life. He has been linked to many similar crimes in the area, but he was never found guilty as he passed away in 1986. 22-year-old Caitlin Kelly lived in Shawano County, Wisconsin in 2020. Shawano is home to the Menominee tribe, which is a nation of Native Americans. She also had a baby son. On June 18, 2020, Caitlin was reported missing from the reservation by her family. Caitlin's mom, Michelle, said that her daughter was last seen near Silver Canoe Road, walking towards Kashina, Wisconsin. On the night of June 16th, a black SUV was seen parked outside of her home in Chano, a little after 2 a.m. on June 17th. Tribal police and other police departments conducted extensive searches for Caitlin in the area where she last been seen in the days following her disappearance. Family members posted flyers around Wisconsin and pleaded with the public for help in finding Caitlin. On July 22, 2020, Menominee Nation chairperson Joan DeLabreu announced a $5,000 reward for any information leading to Caitlin being found. Despite the investigators and the family's efforts, the case would go cold for a while. Then, in March 2021, Menominee Tribal Police made an announcement regarding Caitlin's disappearance. They said that human remains were discovered on a reservation on March 17th. On March 22nd, after an autopsy was done, it was confirmed that the remains belonged to Caitlin Kelly. Investigators have not yet announced the manner in which Caitlin passed away, or where her remains on a reservation was located. 22-year-old Taisha Bell lived in Chicago, Illinois with her sister and her 2 daughters. On the evening of May 10, 2003, Taisha left her home moments after receiving a mysterious call. She was never seen again. Investigators believe that she intended to go back home, as she left her 2 daughters behind with the television on, and had also left her handbag and candles lit in her room. Foul play was suspected. Investigators tried to find Taisha and also hoped that someone could come forward with more information. Following her disappearance, investigators interviewed an unidentified person of interest in the case, but after searching the person's home and car, the lead fizzled out. Taisha's mom, Lorna, said, "Until I get a knock on my door and police tell me they have found my daughter's remains, I will continue to think of her as alive. 18 years later, in 2021, she got that knock on the door. In December 2020, Tasha's remains, clothes, and personal items were found in a wooded area of Kane County, Illinois. In 2021, using dental records and DNA, investigators were able to identify the remains as belonging to Tasha Bell. It remains unclear how she passed away, but investigators did say that someone took her life. Tasha's case is considered an open investigation, and investigators are asking for the public's help in finding justice for the beloved mother and daughter. Case of Catherine Welsber. Catherine Welsber was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Welsber. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Rafal Nowak, a 31-year-old coworker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafal was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Rafal and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Rafal showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Rafal shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Rafal's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, introduced Rafal to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Rafal and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Rafal and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her coworkers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings combined with those of her partner Rafal allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Maria to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and established the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Welsber. On the same day, Rafal Nowak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Rafal, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work and Rafal couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Rafal, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Raffel. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Raffel, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his deaths. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Lovick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Raffel met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Raffel's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Raffel was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Raffel waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Raffel's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Raffel recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been normal evening. Raffel and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Raffel Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Raffel was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Raffel Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Welsber's murder. The evidence allowed for Raffel to be detained pending further investigation. Raffel claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Raffel's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Raffel had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Luginowicz and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Raffel had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Raffel and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Ladvinovic, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Demetresin, 38, along with Raffel Nowak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine-created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Raffel and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Raffel claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Raffel of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Raffel refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother, that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Raffel also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Raffel allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Raffel's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Raffel more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began. The jury heard that Raffel and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th, Raffel showed no emotion. Anna Leginowicz frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tadevs also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Leginowicz's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tadevs that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Raffel Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Raffel's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Raffel an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Raffel into their home, treating him like a son only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Raffel Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells Burr. Raffel claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Raffel showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12th last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Raffel asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Raffel bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Raffel Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Leginowicz, and her uncle, Tadevs, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadevs had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Raffel and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadevs received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules like the US, Raffel Novak would not have been allowed entry. Raffel had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Raffel's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Raffel from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hardworking individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. 40-year-old Virginia Freeman lived in Brazos County, Texas in 1981. She had a husband and 2 children, 11-year-old Brad and 14-year-old Betsy. Virginia worked as a real estate agent. She had a strong presence in the local community and was a volunteer for the American Red Cross, as well as a local Girl Scouts. Virginia was also part of the First Baptist Church Discovery Program at a Texas A&M University. On December 1, 1981, Virginia received a phone call from a man who wanted to buy a house from her. The man claimed he had the cash to buy the house. Virginia was eager to make the sale, so she confirmed the appointment, even though she had dinner planned with her family and friends. Before heading to the appointment, she drove to her house first. Virginia wanted to tell her children she would be a little late for dinner that evening. She told them that they should get dressed and that she would see them a little later than planned. Virginia then drove to the appointment in her white 1981 Chevrolet station wagon. At 6 p.m., Virginia's husband Charles began to grow concerned. She had not made it home yet. He called the real estate office. He then learned that Virginia went to the appointment at 2 p.m. and had not come back yet. Charles and a friend of his decided to go look for Virginia at the house as she was showing that day. In front of the house, they made a gruesome discovery. Virginia's body was found in a driveway off the house. She had been stabbed in the neck 11 times. Virginia was also choked so hard that her neck was actually broken. She had also been struck across the head multiple times. Investigators believed it was a slab of concrete that was used. It was estimated that she passed away just before 4 p.m. that day. Investigators also concluded Virginia and the client never made it inside house. The ground around her body indicated had a struggle to place. Virginia also had a lot of defensive injuries on her hands. DNA belonging to her attacker was found under her fingernails. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy clipped their fingernails during the examination. It was then carefully sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Investigators knew that it could be used later when DNA was more advanced. The local area was canvassed extensively by investigators. They were looking for any possible leads. Brazos County Crime Stoppers offered a reward of $1,000 for any information. That would lead to an arrest. Investigators also asked anyone living in the local area if they maybe saw Virginia driving her white station wagon, or maybe saw a suspicious man. Even though the house was located in a very secluded area, some witnesses did come forward. Thanks to this, investigators were able to create a composite sketch of the man they were looking for. The image was circulated, but no one recognized the man. One of the co-workers of Virginia said that the man had a country accent, but as this took place in Texas, it did not really help investigators. The coworker also said that the man did not specifically ask for Virginia. He just said that he wanted to see the house. Virginia was on a rotation list, which meant that any new clients who were not yet on the books would be assigned to her. No one was arrested for the crime, and a case eventually went cold, and it would stay that way for a very long time. In 2018, the case was looked into again as DNA was more advanced by then. A company by the name of Parabon Nanolabs were asked by investigators to help solve the case. Parabon has a service called Snapshot DNA Analysis. This means that they can take DNA of a suspect that cannot be traced using DNA databases and create an image of what it might have looked like at the time of the crime, and also what it might look like in the present day. It is not a cheap service. It can cost up to $4,000 for the images. National Geographic decided to pay so the snapshot image could be made of the person who took Virginia's life. In turn, National Geographic would get permission to make an episode about it as part of the Nat Geo Explorer series. Using the DNA found under Virginia's fingernails that belonged to the suspect, Parabon then created these images. The first image showed how the suspect would have looked like at the age of 25, as it was believed that it was roughly how old he was at the time the crime was committed. Parabon can also make use of genetic genealogy. It is a process where they take the DNA of the suspect and in a look at public DNA databases such as JetMatch. Using this technique, it led investigators to female relatives of the suspect, two second cousins. After some more investigating, investigators believe James Ottoyerd took the life of Virginia. James lived in Brazos County at the time of the crime in 1981. He was convicted in May 1987 of abducting and taking the life of 9-year-old Candy Janelle Goodland. On August 11, 1999, was executed in Huntsville, Texas. Fortunately, investigators found his son of ease and were still alive. His son then provided a DNA sample that could be tested against that of the DNA found on Virginia. On June 25, 2018, investigators held a press conference. It was then announced they were able to confirm had James did indeed take the life of Virginia Freeman. Sheriff Chris Kirk had us to say, "The solving of this cold case after so many years of investigating brings relief and closure for the Freeman family, Virginia's friends, the local real estate industry, and our community. It is an incredible example of the tenacity and perseverance of the investigators involved in this case. Also, we were blessed with opportunities to take advantage of emerging technologies in forensic sciences that led to a breakthrough. We are elated to finally close this case. Our one regret is that we cannot put handcuffs on James and prosecute him for what he did. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.